Okay, hello, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to host this panel and have the opportunity to talk about something that is pretty much important, such as rollup, governing rollups. Also very happy to talk about this alongside with this chats. And yeah, I want to say that at the end of the talk, we are obviously open for questions from the public. Yeah, right now I'd like to give a chance to our guests to introduce themselves. So talking about what are you working about, role, background. So let's start with you, Chris, and then Ram.
Hey, my name's. Not working? Okay. So my name is Chris. I'm governance lead at L2Beat. If you don't know L2Beat, we are doing assessment of different L2s. We are this independent watchdog that tells you why you shouldn't use most of them and what risks are involved when you are actually using them. And I'm governance lead. So as L2Beat, we are big delegates in many different, especially L2 DAOs. And usually it's me behind the scenes, like doing decisions and discussing stuff alongside with Sinkas, who's also somewhere there on the audience. So yeah, like that's me. That's what I do.
Ram?
Hey, my name is Raam. I'm on the DAO Relations team at the Arbitrum Foundation. So in addition to the Arbitrum Foundation's 3 mission statements, which is to advance the Arbitrum tech stack, to work on strategic grants and partnerships, and also on education and awareness, especially as it relates to the DAO, the Arbitrum Foundation is there to support the DAO in operationalizing whatever it is the DAO wants to do. As long as it's, of course, legal and possible.
Great, thank you guys. I want to give a little bit of context about this panel in terms of currently maybe 3 of the most important topics right now that are currently also very critical trends, I will say, are about cluster ecosystem. I think that this is a very hot topic, but also revenue. There's so much question about it, and then security. So I want to give my first take in general. So the first one is building rollups is pretty hard. That's the reality. But the same thing applies to DAOs, basically. So in this situation, I think that we are maybe in one of the worst situations to maintain this is some sort of smart contracts. I mean, when you have a protocol that has more than one goal, then the thing about building the infrastructure and then maintaining via DAO will become pretty difficult. But yeah, I want to start asking you, Chris, a very simple question, and it's about why we need a governance for rollups. What will be, the rationale behind?
Well, it depends. It depends on, from rollup to rollup. It depends what the governance is actually managing. So usually the reason why we have governance is because we wanted to decentralize the system. We wanted to, push the responsibility away from the funding team to a group of token holders and delegates representing them to make decisions about like what the protocol should be doing. However, I would like to point out that from the ecosystem to the ecosystem, it is different. All those DAOs, all those L2 ecosystems are not the same. For example, Arbitrum DAO is totally different right now in practice than, let's say, Optimism DAO. And it is totally different than ZK Sync DAO. And it is totally different than what Scroll DAO is becoming right now. Because they govern about different things. The processes are set differently, and the responsibility is different. So for me, one of the most interesting things to observe is Arbitrum versus optimism, as these are like those two different approaches to how to actually set up the governance. So optimism is starting from the top to bottom. Like they started very centralized with the foundation, and they are now gradually decentralizing parts of the ecosystem to the community, but preparing the community with certain processes, structures, best practices. They are basically curating how this ecosystem should be governed before pushing this responsibility to the community. On the other hand, Arbitrum took a totally different approach. It was like a YOLO, let's simply push the responsibility to the token holders and we'll see how it will go. And for those of you that don't remember, it almost collapsed in the first week, as the first proposal that was to ratify the constitution and the things, how the DAO is set up, basically failed initially. Which was actually a good thing, because that made all the community participants active. It spurred a lot of discussions. And Arbitrum is building bottom-ups. So it started fully chaotic, without any structure, without any processes. Nobody was told what to do. Basically, delegates were like, yeah, like we're here, we will be voting on whatever you give us to vote for, and we'll figure it out down the road. And it is figuring out down the road. So like right now, we are figuring out how actually do we manage this? How actually do we, what processes, what structures do we need to set up in order to make sure that this exists 5 years from now? Because when we are thinking about those governance structures, we are usually thinking about today. Like, how does it work today? What should we do in order for it to be effective today? And the more interesting question is, how is it going to be doing 10 years from now? When all of us, if everything goes as we plan, all of us should be retired at this point, right? We should have fun and do our stuff. But those protocols need to still exist and operate effectively, and there will be no no backups, like those centralized entities, funders helping the protocol. So the question is how we create this to sustain longer than to sustain us, to be longer than ourselves.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and I think that one of the most important thing is because we have it's a very strong competition. I mean, we have very different approaches, and that's great because every rollup is trying to execute their own strategy, and then we see how different strategies eventually will end up in different implementations, and then different ways to think what the DAO should do, what is the role of the all the stakeholders in that ecosystem, what are the safeguards of the main protocol and so on. So this is a very interesting question and design space about what to do next in order to have a well-established way to govern rollups over the time. I want to jump directly to talk about the Arbitrum case a little bit more, because one thing, kudos for the Arbitrum DAO, because in fact I think that is the first that implements actually on-chain governance. That's a big thing to say congrats. But yeah, I would like to understand a little bit more from the point of view of the Arbitrum Foundation. What would be the main goal of the Arbitrum ecosystem, at least from your side? and then how this translates into the general conception and strategy and future of the protocol itself.
Sure. So, I mean, as Krzysztof alluded to, the DAO had a bit of a chaotic, more bottoms-up, organic start, and since then there's been a lot of activity. I think over 350 snapshot proposals, 50 tally proposals, over 700 million in ARB being spent from its treasury. And interestingly enough, regarding the overall goal, the DAO is currently in the process of ratifying its purpose, mission, and vision. So I think the latest draft is something along the lines of purpose being able to scale Ethereum without compromise, mission being able to enable people with the freedom to build their best on-chain world. And I think the key word there is freedom, and I think it is reflected in a lot of what the Arbitrum tech stack is actually used for today. So for example, now the Arbitrum ecosystem is trying to grow the ways in which the tech stack, the Nitro stack, is being applied and used, mainly through two ways. So one is the Orbit. So Orbit basically gives anyone the freedom to permissionlessly build and launch their own chain that can settle to any parent chain, be it layer 1, layer 2, or even non-EVM blockchains. And on top of this, builders of these customized blockchains can configure things like gas fees, governance tokens, block times, etc., to really meet their own needs. Number 2 is the inception of Stylus. Stylus went on mainnet, I believe, a couple months ago. The DAO basically ratified its existence. With Stylus, it will help onboard millions of non-Web3 developers as well. So using WebAssembly, WASM, you can basically deploy smart contracts in languages other than Solidity, so Rust, C, C++. And there have already been multiple initiatives to push growth in these two verticals. So there have been 2 grant programs from the foundation focusing on Stylus and Orbit. Recently, the DAO just incepted the Stylus Sprint, which is a 5 million grant program to support people building in Stylus. So yeah, back to your initial question, I think the DAO is already doing well in setting the direction of the ecosystem, and we're there to support.
If I may jump into that, because like what you said about this mission, vision, purpose, fortunately I'm here, I'm a delegate in Arbitrum DAO, but I'm also a delegate in other DAOs, so I can fill in for them not being at this panel. And I would say that this vision, mission, purpose is actually something that every single L2 could say. Every single L2, at least Ethereum-based L2, its vision, its whole purpose is to scale Ethereum, without limits, to create the best ecosystem for builders to build on. And it's all true. But when we are thinking right now about, this competition about those L2s, they're all fighting with each other, like, we are better in this, we are better in that, we do better this. But if you look into where the real product market fit in crypto right now is, like, go check CoinGecko and look at Tron volume yesterday. Like, every time there is some turbulence in the market, I like going into CoinGecko and checking Tron volume because it consistently is around its whole market cap. It consistently is above $100 billion daily volume. This is the product market fit for crypto. And where is it happening? On Tron. His Excellency is basically deciding where this money is actually stored and if you can transfer it or not. And this is wrong. Like, the reason why we are building those rollups, why it all matters, because rollups are objectively better than Tron. Why? Because they are, at least if they implement all the things that they are supposed to implement, you can check it at L2Bit if they do, they are secured by Ethereum. And you no longer have to, trust into His Excellency or Raam or whoever else to run your rollup. We actually had a very good situation recently because DYDX basically ceased their operations on Ethereum. They moved to Cosmos for reasons that I will not be expanding on right now. But they moved to Cosmos, and they basically shut down their operations on Ethereum. When they did it, there was still $70 million locked in a bridge of DYDX. And even though they turned off their servers, they basically left Ethereum. If you have your money stuck in this bridge, you can always go and take it out and unlock it on Ethereum, because that's what rollups give you if they are implemented properly. That's why Arbitrum and Optimism and Scroll and zkSync and all the other ecosystems that I will not mention all of them because there's like more than 100 right now, are better objectively than, for example, Tron. And our whole goal is to basically to make the future in which hundreds of billions of dollars are transferred in a system that is, credibly neutral, incredibly permissionless, incredibly trustless.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that, the idea of rollups be the main home for users to transact and do very high volume, any kind of activity is a very great thing to see to happen very soon. Well, it's already happening, but it can grow, 10x from here at least in just 1 year. Let's see what happens. But I have one question about, okay, we now understand what is the bull case for rollups itself, but I will understand the other side of the thing that is currently, this will let me also to introduce the ideal clusters. But currently, we have different ecosystem and 10 DAOs that are pushing so hard for, to deploy, adopt different technology stacks or rollup stacks. I would like to understand then what is the bull case for DAOs spending money to push very hard to adopt that specific stack, such as Arbit. What could be the reason to, hey, let's just use some parts of our money, the treasury, to allocate there, and then say, okay, we want to have maybe 10, 20, I don't know, chains using the specific rollup stack. What should be the way to see why we are doing this, and using the DAOs for that purpose?
Sure. So I think it comes down to flywheel effects. It's a term that people like to throw around a lot, but I think it's the term that makes most visual sense. So, more builders, more orbits, more users means more chain revenues. But beyond that, it also means more liquidity within the Arbitrum ecosystem. It means more synergies between all of the players within the Arbitrum ecosystem. If you build an orbit stack or you just come to the Arbitrum ecosystem, you now have access to all of these amazing dApps that are already building on Arbitrum and will make it even easier for you to use these services. I think Camelot, for example, if you were to launch an orbit chain on Arbitrum, they will come and build their native product on your own orbit stack. And then I think going one level further, now assuming we have these new orbits, new builders, new users, we have more and greater diversity in the stakeholders who should be interested, at least from my perspective, in governing how its ecosystem moves forward. And especially if you look at all of these DAO programs, there are a lot of benefits to actually participating in them. So now all of a sudden, if you are an orbit chain and you're just plugged into governance, maybe you have a governance analyst who can, do all the dirty work on the forums and keep you up to date. You now know what grant programs, what incentive programs, what community benefits there are for you as a builder or an orbit chain within the Arbitrum ecosystem. I think one thing to note is that Arbitrum could do better at building that narrative of, hey, we are all here, we're all part of the Arbitrum team, we're all orbit chains, because right now there are, I believe, 60 to 70 orbit chains, but they're all quite unique, which again comes down to the freedom and flexibility that orbit chains give you. But yeah, I hope to see every orbit chain being a delegate and being active in Arbitrum governance. Because, yeah, we're all part of the same community, and I like to think of it as a country analogy. If you think of Arbitrum as a country in the world of Ethereum, Orbit chains you can think of as towns or businesses who come and settle and build in the country of Arbitrum. They should all be interested in how the country is governed, because yeah, the success of the country will impact their success too.
Cool. That makes me think about you know, the typical critics about doing this some sort of deploy. You know, what type of change you want inside of Ethereum, or you know, the people say, hey, but we're facing with liquidity fragmentation, different security models, how to track this, and then you know, the different labs teams are just saying, okay, we can, aside as you know, building this stack, we can build things on top of it, like, okay, let's just align different chains together with some sort of cluster. And I think like different models. I mean, a model such as the super chain is very different to the Orbit model or hyperchain model, and very other that probably we will see in the next year. But you know, the design space for in this vertical is, you know, is pretty big, and I think that there is a lot of things to think about. But I'm curious to know the, you know, the position of L2Bit with you, Chris, about with this different approaches to align rollup stacks, superchain, hyperchain, Orbit. How do you deal with that situation? Because I think that the criteria might vary depending of the stack, or how the, you know, the interoperability is going to be, and maybe it will be quite hard to follow, right?
So there are several things to discuss here. First of all, from our perspective, following the common architecture, you know, and following one of the already battle-tested solutions is a good idea. Like basically, building rollups is hard. Building good rollups is even harder. So we would like for people not to try to reinvent the wheel every time they are doing something simply for the sake of doing something differently. It's much better if we, you know, and I believe that at the end we will unify at some, maybe not one, but probably several different architectures, and we'll stick to them, because simply it costs so much to develop those things, and it costs so much to audit them, battle test them, and make sure that they are working, that it simply makes no sense as for the user, from the user perspective. The end goal is for them to not make a difference if they are using one chain or another, and especially one architecture or another. So, you know, while there is a huge difference between optimistic chains and ZK chains, for the users, like, hopefully soon they will not have to understand that. They will. The only thing that they will have to understand is whether those chains are secure, whether they actually implemented all the things that they were supposed to implement. And by the way, you can check it at L2Bit. So if they are green on L2Bit, then it doesn't matter how exactly is it built. The chain might have their own reason to do stuff, you know, their way, to customize some things. Maybe they need shorter block times. Maybe they need something specific. Maybe they want to address MEV in a specific way. There are, you know, ways to optimize stuff, but they shouldn't be, for example, or at least I believe that in a few years we'll come up to how exactly do we settle on the main chain? How do we prove that things are going as they are supposed to be going? We will settle on several different mechanisms for interop to make sure that the movement between those chains is smooth, and, you know, it will be that. Like, there will be still innovation, but there will be no reason to try to reinvent this. The same way as Microsoft learned the hard way that, you know, 2 operating systems for mobile phones is maybe enough. at least for now. And it takes enormous effort to try to push for a third. So if Microsoft failed, then probably many will fail as well. The same, I believe, will become in a few years in rollups, as in simply building a rollup from scratch will make absolutely no sense. However, I think that there is, there are other things to this clustering theme. And in my opinion, one of the main themes that we will observe soon is user adoption. Like having those different things in your ecosystem, like extends your offering to different target audiences. So, and some people say, hey, do we need so many chains? Do we need so many L2s? And in case of, do we need so many different technologies? I don't think so. But do we need so many different companies providing services in this financial sector? Of course we need them. Like, simply look into how many banks do we have in the world. I could imagine each bank having their own chain because they want to have their own infrastructure, not necessarily developing their own chain from scratch, but running their own chain. Why not? So, because they are the interface to the customers at the end. They are handling the customers. They are gathering the customers and making money out of them. So there is a place for way more chains that we have right now, and they will be clustered because it makes sense, because the users will be able to explore different offerings quicker, but not necessarily building things completely differently, like simply for the sake of building things differently.
And I think as these clusters grow, people who decide to maybe build an orbit chain a bit later will see and learn maybe from the lessons that existing orbit chains have already taken. They'll see, okay, this use case is kind of similar to mine. I want to see how they've deployed their orbit chain, and then maybe I'll modify something very slightly to align best with my use case.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm worried about is like, okay, so we're going to have several chains that are focusing on very specific side of the market, or taking different verticals, DeFi, NFTs, games, whatever. But my question is how to sustain all these chains, because maybe a few of them will have secure their budget for a long time. But maybe it's not the case for all the rollups that are today deployed, right? So my question is, how do you think, or how do you envision how will be the the mechanics around revenue? Because right now we have the assumption that if the amount of user is sufficient to supply with fees to the chain to sustain itself, unless the basic infrastructure, we're okay. But if it's not the case, what else we can do in the meantime? Currently, we have a lot of incentive from different things with the token, grants and so on. But this will not be lasting forever. So, what could be the other options? What do you think about how to think revenue for for the health of the chains?
So I think. Do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take it. So, it's easy. Like, they will need to find customers that will pay fair market price for what they're offering. If they don't, they will die. This is the same as with any other startups. Blockchain and Rollup is just an infrastructure for them. They need to figure out like how to serve their customers, what are the customers, where are they, and how to reach them, and how to convince them to pay them money. If they do, they will survive. And most of them will have to figure it out, and will figure it out one way or another, sooner or later. There are many ways on how chains can make money, the same way as there are many ways in which applications can make money. If you are not paying for something, probably you are the product. So probably those, some of those chains, if they will want to be free, they will have to somehow figure out how to monetize the users that they have, how to sell user data, user activity, access to those users, stuff like that. And you say that there are so many roll-ups. I saw more startups in Warsaw alone in 2010, and some of them are still alive, most are not. And I think that the same, I'm not surprised with having 200 roll-ups. I'm surprised if we will not have 2,000 roll-ups, in 2026.
I can give some more anecdotal examples as seen in Arbitrum. So obviously, yeah, the initial sustainable revenue generating source was chain revenue, but since then the DAO have voted to incept a lot of initiatives. So one was to expand the Arbitrum expansion program. So the AEP is the licensing model. So if somebody chooses to deploy an Orbit chain to a chain other than Arbitrum as the parent chain, then 10% of that Orbit's revenue comes back to the Arbitrum DAO, 8% of it to the treasury, and 2% to the developer guild. Arbitrum DAO has also experimented with the diversification of its treasury into stable yield-bearing assets. So like tokenized treasury bills, there was the stable treasury endowment program, which is currently live with Arbitrum, where they decided to diversify 1% of its treasury. There's, what else? The GCP, which is the gaming fund, the proposal to invest 200 million in gaming, which was alluded to, I think, in the last panel. That's another way which Arbitrum is looking to gain yield. There's discussions about how to gain yield on the ETH sitting at the Arb treasury. There's some experiments around venture funds, and also discussions around time boost. So if approved by the DAO, time boost would be an upgrade that lets users pay a priority fee to utilize an express lane. So basically, yeah, being able to execute their transactions faster. So these are some examples of how Arbitrum DAO is currently looking at generating some alternative revenue streams.
Yeah, I will say precisely one thing about the alternatives to find some sort of revenue aside of the the typical user fees. I think that we have two different ways to think about revenue. One of them is users itself paying for their stuff, and the other one is basically use the same infrastructure to to get extra revenue. So I have seen some people talking about alternative ways to do that by, for example, take the user funds from the bridge to do some sort of DeFi strategies, such as Blast is doing today, I believe. Do you think that this is type of non-typical ways to get revenue will be the common standard, or really we are still pushing so hard for the users to actually pay for their activity?
No, funds in the bridges belong to the users. Whoever's having those conversations are really not thinking straight.
Yeah, so I think that those conversations are inevitable, and some chains will do that. But then that's what I said, that if you are if you are free, basically free, then you have to figure out how to monetize the users that you have. This is a way of monetizing your users, because you are actually monetizing. You are adding the risk to their asset simply to make profit out of it. And I think that I totally agree with you. I would never vote to accept using users' funds just like that. But I think that in the future we will have alternative bridges, for example, that will do that. That will allow for bridging to the chain with the assets underneath being used in some DeFi or staking or whatever, and sharing this profit with the users, so they get part of it. But we have to understand that this is not free. This is actually, we are getting money for the increased risk, especially that this risk stacks up. And in case of failure, the consequences are, the consequences are going up exponentially. So we should be careful about that. And as Raam said, at least I hope that in Arbitrum nobody is speaking about this seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all saw what happened when certain centralized exchanges decided to use users of funds. And yeah, really hope to not see that in the L2 space.
Yeah, I will take the points to introduce the idea of security and rollups. I want to discuss a little bit before to pass the opportunity to the public to make some questions. And the thing is, security. Maybe the perception of security changed on the on the way of the markets evolves. I mean, if the markets is going up, maybe the perception of security is to say, hey, we can take more risk, and this can be this can be translated to the perception of the community of the DAOs. So my question is how to think security in terms of when someone participates in governance, is some sort of stakeholder in whatever way. In terms of, don't forget that security is pretty important for the future of the rollup, because we cannot add too much risk because we are basically managing a blockchain. So what could be the thing that we need to have in mind when participating in governance and think about security too, in order to make the best decisions over the time?
Yeah, I think obviously it's unfair to assume that all users should be technically competent enough to know the security implications of any given, especially technical proposal. But I think it comes down to how the DAO decides to structure itself. Arbitrum now is moving to basically an organization of organizations, encompassing of working groups, councils, committees, such as the Arbitrum Research and Development Committee, which partly is there to help the Arbitrum DAO better digest and understand any proposal, especially technical ones, doing like audits on the source code, etc. And yeah, there's also the Security Council in Arbitrum. So the Security Council is a committee of 12 members of multi-sigs who are able to execute any emergency transactions if there's a critical vulnerability in the system, especially if it's time sensitive, because obviously the governance process takes a while. So Security Council have been given the power by the DAO to actually step in these instances. So yeah, I think it's understanding that not everyone's going to be technical, and deciding best how to elect the people in positions who are able to provide that contextual expertise knowledge, and also to step in case there is a security emergency.
Stage 2 are burst, Chris?
Yes. It's actually a bit more nuanced, because it depends on the case. Not everyone, not every use case is made for stage 2 rollups, but basically, for large scale chains, I would say that yes, this is the measure of security. It's not just some kind of a trophy that you want to achieve. It's simply the measure of how secure your chain is and how secure are your users on your chain. But speaking of security, adding to what you said, technical expertise is one thing, but security is not just about technical expertise. And how to make sure that we, are mindful of security. If you have your money on this chain, if you are building a protocol on this chain, or if you are building a product based on Orbit, or whatever else that, if you are in this ecosystem, you should probably also make sure that you have some stake in it, and you can delegate it to someone who is actually mindful of security. And especially if if you are issuing a lot of funds on this chain, then or have people breach to this chain, your customers breach to this chain. Let's say that you are a traditional finance company that is building something on top of Arbitrum, and you are selling this to your customers, then you definitely should make sure that you have a voting power, and you delegate this voting power. Either you handle it yourself, or you delegate it to someone who is not talking about using bridged assets in DeFi for any other purpose.
Yeah, And I think just to add to that, another thing that's often overlooked in terms of security is the governance system itself. You know, how do you design the governance system which is robust against governance attacks and takeovers? It needs to be decentralized enough that it's capture resistant. The quorums need to be high enough so that, you know, nobody has the feasible liquidity to buy up enough of the governance tokens to then vote in favor of a contentious proposal. But then at the same time, you can't have it too high where you have like not voter fatigue, but voter paralysis. Decision paralysis, sorry, where certain proposals you struggle to meet the quorum because all of a sudden it's unrealistic that you expect that many people to actually vote on a proposal. So
I don't fully agree with that because, like, I don't think that the goal should be to make those systems in a way that does not allow for somebody to accumulate enough voting power to actually push the system in their own direction. If they want to do it, if they are willing to take the cost and the risk of doing that, fair. Like, that's exactly why we designed token-based voting systems. That's why you have the governance, and that's why governance tokens are valuable, because somebody actually can do it. If His Excellency, for example, would like to buy enough ARP tokens in order to make Arbitrum, you know, Tron-aligned, then I don't see a reason why should we not allow him to do that. Like, simply, there is a price to it. And if he's willing to take this price, so be it. I expect, actually, in the future, you know, right now, the typical actors in our crypto systems are usually people like us, or like whales, or investors, like, but basically people from this industry. But I expect soon enough that this will be large conglomerates, or those large usual suspects from the tech world, those, you know, Microsofts, IBMs of this space. Because if financial systems move to crypto, which I expect that it will happen, then all those companies that are right now building traditional finance, they will be building on crypto rails, and they will, for certain, understand how the token-based governance works, and they will make sure that they have representation there. Our job is to make sure that our governance systems are ready for them to come in a way that, like, we at least require them to be transparent. We at least require them to be open and available for discussion, stuff like that. But our systems are designed in a way for somebody to try to come and buy it.
yeah, of course you can come in and buy it. These are permissionless systems, but it comes down to kind of the intent of what you're trying to do. If you're proposing something that clearly goes against the Constitution, would you not consider that an attack?
Against the Constitution, yes. However, you know, I've read the Constitution recently, and it's kind of, you know, kind of open-ended in terms of what can be done. Like, we all probably know the compound case from a while back with Humpy proposal, and the question is, was it a governance attack? Like, I don't necessarily think that it was. Like, obviously, in this case, it's a bit more complicated, but I would expect such cases to be, you know, on a regular basis. We had this with ApeChain, right? ApeChain had a vote of where should they go with their chain, and Arbitrum won at the end, but Polygon was pretty open in the way that they bought actually Ape tokens to vote in their favor. And some people were upset about it, and like, for me, this is exactly why we have those tokens. This is exactly what it's supposed to be. They are meant to exactly do this. And I expect it to happen more and more in the future.
Yeah, and I agree. And I guess in that example, if there was a conflict of interest policy in place, then you could clearly define that that maybe was a foul play. But maybe, yeah, to your point, considering that anyone can actually buy into these systems, then the more important priority should be ensuring that the delegates who are meant to be voting are always active, and that there are systems in play which always ensure that there is active redelegation, so that the community is always delegating their voting power to delegates who will always be on top of things. And if they're not, then there should be a mechanism so that, you know, the voting power is healthily reallocated.
And actually, this is not neither new nor, you know, unique for our systems. Like, if you're wondering why you can drink Pepsi instead of Coca-Cola in Pizza Hut, the reason is that Pepsi actually bought enough stake in the company that owns Pizza Hut and some other fast food chains to make them more aligned with Pepsi rather than Coca-Cola. This is exactly why we had capitalism and why we have those systems where you can actually buy yourself an alignment of another party with your goals.
Well, guys, this has been a very interesting discussion. I think we are on time to give the opportunity for the public to make some questions. So, yeah.
Yes, we have one here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jan. I'm a security guy, cybersecurity, doing audits. Also worked a while in the traditional finance world. And I think when I look at DAOs, one challenge I see is like controlling the human part, like in terms of security operations. So basically what you see in traditional finance institutions is basically you have a development laptop or PC, and that is controlled. Some software is installed on there. Like you can't go on certain web pages, la 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 la. Everything is super controlled at like what like devs actually can do, and that eliminates a lot of attack vectors, social engineering attacks, and like a lot of other attack vectors. And I wonder really how will DAOs kind of will DAOs be able to keep up with that, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's a tricky one. I think it slightly goes against the values of this space, of course. But I think at a social level, yes. So, for example, DAOs could publish best practices on how multi-sigs should operate. They could launch best OPSEC practices. They could have allow lists of service providers or services or recommended wallets that you as a DAO member are recommended to use. Obviously, there's no way to enforce that as far as I'm aware, but I suppose it comes more through the education.
Yeah, no, I also think that simply we are early and we are heading in the direction that you're mentioning. Some bodies in the DAO governance already do that. For example, some security councils already have quite high standard in terms of these, human operations. For example, I know some Arbitrum Security Council members didn't come to Bangkok to not increase the risk of, too many Security Council members being at the same place. So they are already mindful about it. And I believe that with time, our operational procedures will evolve to ensure that more and more of such practices, security practices, and an OPSEC will be in place. I totally expect it to be developing a lot in the coming years, especially as the value of those systems grows.
Any other question?
We have one here.
Hey, a question, I guess, mainly for Krzysztof, but maybe also for the broader audience. So, critical question. So let me preface it with saying that I'm a huge fan of L2B and what you're doing, both on, the media/research side and the governance side. Nevertheless, between those two areas, I, think there is a pretty strong conflict of interest. And curious how you think about that. If you have already things in place to manage that, to deal with that, or looking into it.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I actually respond to it quite often. I do agree. I recognize that there is a potential conflict of interest. To give context, we as L2Beat are largest delegate, for example, in Optimism, largest delegate in Arbitrum, largest delegate in Scroll, second largest delegate in zkSync, and so on, and probably with time it might grow. Some could question, okay, if you are representing L2Beat in Optimism, aren't you doing something in favor of Arbitrum because you are also there? And my answer is, no, I don't do it because, I have my own integrity, and I am pretty open with this fact that I am present in several different places. Therefore, for some roles, for example, I'm probably not the best person. If something requires being totally aligned with one given ecosystem and only with that ecosystem, then probably I'm not the right person to be elected for that role. And I'm pretty open about that. But also, I don't believe that, I don't see there a conflict of interest because I don't see those rollups really competing with each other. I'm proactively trying them not to compete because the enemy is not there. if Arbitrum or if Optimism wins against Arbitrum and takes over Arbitrum's users, it doesn't matter in 10 years from now when like current industry is tiny. So it doesn't matter if they win the current users. If they don't grow 10 times in the next 2-3 years, they will be irrelevant anyway. So like the competition between rollups for me today kind of look like, you know, Samsung competing with Siemens for who has the best phone, and not realizing that Apple is coming after them. Or you know, my background is in Linux and free software, and I remember all those tribal wars. Which Linux distribution is better? And you know, is Slackware better? No, Red Hat is better. No, Debian is better. Nobody cares today, right? Like nobody even recognizes those names anymore. And I believe that if those rollups, if our ecosystems don't realize that their goal is not to take over users of another ecosystem, but actually to take over the world, they will fail ultimately. So like my goal is actually to make them aligned on the goal of expanding outside of our current crypto ecosystem and not fighting with within each other. We are to grow the pie, not to turn this ecosystem in some kind of, you know, weird PvP battle royale kind of stuff. Because it makes, first of all, it makes no sense. And then it's like current industry is tiny in relation.
Okay. We have time for, unfortunately, the last question.
Okay, last question. Maybe can come here.
Okay. You go. Scream.
Maybe you can take my microphone. No problem.
Okay, thank you. So I want to ask, like, you, the roll-up infrastructure, you are focusing on security and revenue both, right? So on the security side, how do you see, you know, adopting EigenLayer for decentralized data availability solutions? Because what I see that, you know, most of the roll-ups chains are still having centralized data availability. And secondly, when you talk about the revenue side, like as a DAO, why don't you look upon the price action of the token also when you already have a token? Because what I feel, if I simply give you some stats, Solana versus Arbitrum today, right? The volumes are at par, right? The Arbitrum is performing very well, is at par with Solana, but if you look at the market cap difference, it's huge, right? So what is doesn't DAO as a community look upon you know, coming up with some new ideas for working on the price action side also for the token?
Not really, as far as I'm aware. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We are thinking about it actually. However, you know, we are running, like we are playing the long game. So, you know, about Solana today having larger market cap, yes, they have larger market cap, but they, you know, they took a sacrifice to get there. I don't see that actually of an issue. But in terms of price action in Arbitrum, yes, we are, like, the price, basically, talking about price is a sensitive and delicate matter, and I've been advised to not discuss it publicly too much. However, what I can say is, yes, price of the token is super important because the token secures the system. The token cannot go low, because if the token price is too low, then the price for His Excellency to try to align Arbitrum with Tron goes way lower than it is right now, and we cannot allow for that. So there is stuff that is being discussed. For example, how to introduce staking, and with staking, how to share some of the revenue that the DAO is generating with the token holders, so that they can have also, you know, they can get some value coming from the ecosystem. But all those discussions are, I would say, right now at the very early stages.
So I mean, I also been into this industry since past 8 years, and I have been investing into some crypto Web3 projects as well. So what I have understood so far is that being an investor also, what we consider is that, you know, when a project is coming for fundraising, it's the product that they're pitching is the one product, but the token that they're coming up is the second product, right? And when as a trader community as well, let's say if I look up from their lens, most of the trader community, retail masses, they look upon the price action. So Solana got hype because of the price action. Arbitrum was in a hype, but eventually their hype kind of died just because of the bad price action. So this is my view. So that's why this was my question intended towards it, because I like that point where you said that yes, revenues are important.
Yes.
Chains have to look upon earning more revenues to sustain. So then obviously the price of the token also depends upon the security of the chain, right? At some point. So that's why this question.
I would say that security depends on the price. Price does not necessarily always reflect the security. But yeah, like I totally agree with that, and we are mindful of that in the DAO as well. At least I can say that, like I actually published it on the forum recently within this vision, mission, purpose thread. That yes, like I believe that one of the top priorities for the DAO is to figure out ways of securing the token price. Not for the token price itself, but simply for the security of Arbitrum. Because I cannot imagine Arbitrum TVL going 5 times without Arbitrum price going up. Because there, like if it happens, then suddenly, you know, 10 or like $6 billion token is securing 100 billion in the bridge. And it's risky. So one needs to go with the other. And we need to figure out ways for doing that. We are thinking about it. Definitely it's early at this point. I hope we'll have some solutions by probably beginning of next year.
Thank you.
Well, I think that that's it. So thank you very much, guys, for attending this panel. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So keep enjoying the event.
Let's go. Thank you, guys. Thank you.